So I think we're coming to the next topic on the agenda. I think we violated the tight schedule a little bit, right? Mr. Fett, you need to tell me a little bit how much time we actually have for the panel, but let's get into it. 45 minutes. Very good, very good. Let's come to the first panel, which is titled Europe After the Brexit. On March 29, Prime Minister Theresa May wrote the letter to European Council President Donald Tusk to notify him of the UK's intention to leave the EU. The letter starts the Article 50 procedure for exit, and Article 50 of the Treaty on European Union sets out the process for a member state wishing to exit the EU. Now, this is our topic for today, and most likely one of the core topics for Europeans and for European leaders for the years to come. In order to do justice to this topic and its diverse facets and implications, I'm very delighted to invite our panelists on stage, representing very different entities and perspectives, but all concerned with Europe after the Brexit. Let's start with Sylvie Matherat, Chief Regulatory Officer and member of the Management Board of Deutsche Bank, responsible for compliance, anti-financial crime, regulatory affairs, government and public affairs. You joined Deutsche Bank in 2014, came from Banque de France, where she was Deputy Director General and responsible for regulation and financial stability issues, payment and settlement infrastructure. Let's also welcome Michael Theurer, member of the European Parliament, member of the FDP Federal Bureau and Federal Executive Committee, as well as regional chair of FDP Baden-Württemberg. Since 2009, member of the European Parliament. Welcome. Jens Wilhelm, member of the Executive Board and Chief Investment Officer of Union Asset Management since 2008, and member of the Executive Committee Deutsches Aktieninstitut. Welcome. So in this panel on Europe after Brexit, I'd like to touch upon three major content areas. First, the true meaning of Brexit. What is it and what is it not? Second, the way towards a successful execution of the Brexit vote, negotiation strategies and potential hurdles. And third, the implications of a soft or a hard, of a successful or a non-successful Brexit on the people, the real economy, the financial markets, and the banks. In order to get us going and lift the blood pressure of our audience as well as our panelists, I'd like to kick us off with a few hopefully controversial closed-end questions and ask our panelists to ideally respond just with a show of hands. Okay with that procedure? Very good. So let's start with the true meaning of Brexit. David Cameron, his Chancellor George Osborne and many other senior figures who wanted to stay in the EU predicted an immediate economic crisis if the UK voted to leave. House prices would fall, there would be a recession with a big rise in unemployment, and an emergency budget would be needed to bring in the large cuts in spending that would be needed. The pound did slump the day after the referendum. We're remaining 15% lower against the dollar and around 10% down against the euro. But the predictions of an immediate doom have not proved accurate. With the UK economy estimated to have grown 1.8% in 2016, second only to Germany with its 1.9%. Inflation has risen to 2.3%. In February, its highest rate for 3.5 years. Unemployment has continued to fall to stand at an 11-year low at 4.8%. Annual house prices increases have fallen from 9.4, but we're still at an inflation-busting 7.4 in December, according to official figures. Now, here's my first question. Is Brexit an economic stability or even growth program for the UK? Yes, no. Question again, is Brexit an economic stability or even growth program for the UK? Who says yes? Who says no? Unanimous vote. So pretty clear perspective. Britain joined the European Community in 1973, but has long been a special, someday semi-detached member of the EU, outside the euro and the Schengen zone, with a good number of special rights and rebates, and increasingly Eurosceptic, introducing additional complexity into a European integration process. Now the UK has voted to leave the club, offering opportunities to the remaining EU member states of becoming more integrated in the next few years. So here's my second question. Is Brexit an integration program for the remaining EU member states? Once again, is Brexit an integration program for the remaining EU member states? Yes?
Should
I hope so.
Yeah.
Okay. No one who votes no. Okay, interesting. So let's kick us off. What does Brexit actually mean for each one of you? What are the things that come immediately to mind when you think about Brexit? Sylvie, want to start?
Well, first of all, certainly a lot of work. But I think it's, it is a political decision, and you need, every time you discuss Brexit, I'm always surprised because there's a lot of emotion about it. I think there is a time for emotion and a time for action, and now we need to move for action. So we may have our own feelings, and personally I do regret it, but it is what it is, and we need to be ready to adapt to it. And so that's what we are going to do. So Brexit means a lot of work indeed.
Yeah, I think it's a major challenge for Europe, and meaning for both parties, for the UK and for the Eurozone, in many aspects. Future path of economic growth, political stability, and we have discussed it, the global position of Europe in a changing landscape. And therefore, I mean, the question will be how the Brexit will be handled. If badly handled, probably the damage can be great. I mean, you have avoided a bit this question. And therefore, I can only hope that all political leaders follow the diplomatic advices that we have heard today to get the picture right and to build bridges instead of breaking them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Interesting. So the perspectives of the financial markets, what's the political perspective?
Yeah, first of all, we didn't have the doom after the referendum, but we also didn't have the boom, which was promised by Nigel Farage and some others. So I have three pop songs coming in my mind. First is Always Think Twice. The second is Simon and Garfunkel's There Are 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. So that is Article 50. But after the soccer game yesterday in Frankfurt has won, it was exciting. Today there is Dortmund to Bayern, against Bayern. I remember this soccer Champions League match between Liverpool and Dortmund some months ago, and Dortmund was in a lead. But then in the end, Liverpool at home has won, and they were singing the old Beatles song, Never Walk Alone. And Liverpool voted in favor of Remain in the campaign. So I still hope and believe that a country which is the mother country of the parliamentary democracy is not relying on a referendum, because if we look to the mother country of referenda, that is Switzerland, if they realize or recognize that a decision was wrong, they make another referendum to correct it.
Now, we have seen the referendum, and we have heard a number of commentaries. I think Theresa May said we're leaving the EU, we're not leaving Europe. What is it then that, in your view, the UK actually wants to achieve, and what does it want to avoid in those negotiations? And also the other way around, what is the Eurozone, what is the EU trying to achieve, and what is it trying to avoid in these negotiations?
I can say with Baroness Catherine Ashton that I don't know what the UK wants to achieve. In fact, I think the opinion building process in the UK is still undergoing. So some skeptics or critics raise the question, is that Great Britain, or will it end up with Little England. So we see these huge frictions in between the UK. I hope that they find a way, and most probably that was a proposal of the Prime Minister Theresa May with an election to get a legitimization for the further process. So the UK have to decide themselves what they want to achieve. What we are focusing and concentrating in the European Parliament and in the member states of the 27 is what we would like to achieve. And I think that is a fair approach, because my major fear is that we are investing too much time and energy, not in solving our future problems, how to get back on a growth path in whole Europe, how to challenge or to cope the challenge of demographic change, how to overcome the gap of technology and innovation. But now we are stuck in a negotiation process which will absorb tremendous energy to get along with this Brexit. And from my point of view, it is absolutely necessary that these remaining member states join together and formulate a joint position. And then we are going into the negotiation, and hopefully both sides will do it in a sincere cooperation, because if we look at the interests of companies, enterprises and the people, I think a partnership between the UK and the European Union with the remaining 27 member states is in the interest of all. So I'm still optimistic we can cope with it, and as responsible politicians we should do that. That is the best answer to all populists.
I think, therefore, the picture is clear. I mean, you have mentioned it, it's in the interest of both parties. We share so many common values, we have common interests, we have the same political ideas, we are democracies, we have the same idea about how economies work, we have the same challenges, we have a refugee crisis that we have to solve together. So I think this, and I like the idea of the jigsaw puzzle, I think the picture is not so different in the eyes of both parties. The question is how the pieces of the puzzle can be put together, and I think that takes a lot of time. And I think the most important question now is how, and especially from the perspective of capital markets, how the time is being used, and we have a hard deadline. I mean, we have 2 years that we have to negotiate against, and we have now elections that will cost some time. And I think it's in the interest of all parties involved to send signals that I think there is readiness to have behind-the-scenes diplomacy, to create some transitionary agreements, to create some stability and perspective for economic institutions that have to invest, and split the process between how we can manage this transitionary period, how we can create safety and security in this time, and then maybe the final picture is a bit more out, and we create time and have a period in which we can put this puzzle together. If we don't take this time, I think we might end up in a very difficult situation.
It's interesting, Catherine, you mentioned the clear picture as one of the core success factors for negotiations. It seems like there's a confidence that we share that target picture between the EU and the UK. Frankly, I'm not so sure. The comments around why Theresa May is now pushing for the elections has been interpreted in very different ways, right? There's the one party that says, she wants a strong mandate. Others, say, and she may use that mandate to, go for a strong position in the negotiations, or a more considerate position in the negotiation. In the British press, also in the European press, there's always the talk about soft Brexit versus hard Brexit. So it seems to me it is worth diving a bit deeper into that target picture. What does soft Brexit, what does hard Brexit actually mean, and what implications might that have on you and your positions, on us as members in the financial services industry, and also on the people of Europe?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it's I found that a little worrying, to be honest, to realize that the consensus seems to be that nobody really knows what everybody wants to achieve, but everybody agrees that we should provide certainty. So, I mean, honestly, what does it mean? When you need to deal with that, when you have 2 years to be ready, I mean, 2 years is a very short period of time. And I completely agree that it would be nice to have a good agreement, that everybody goes out of that situation in a nice way. But what does it mean in practice? I mean, if you take our case, we are the largest bank branch operating in the UK. We do have something like 9,000 people there. So, I mean, they do have real question. Where do I register my children for in the next 2 years at school? I mean, that's a very concrete question. When you say, well, you know, for front office people, if you want to deal with AU clients, you need to be based in AU, in continental Europe. Does it mean that I have to move all the front office people to Germany or not? I mean, we are speaking of 2,000 people. That's not a small number. When you say, well, but if you deal with those people here in continental Europe, in Germany in our case, then I need to book my contracts here. So it means that I need to build the IT capacity. It's not something you do overnight. I mean, we are speaking of millions of trades. Then, I mean, you have a lot of clients they do have a contract, of course. And in the contract, it is written that they are engaged with DB London. I need to change that to make they are engaged with DB Germany. It looks stupid. Huge amount of work. I mean, the lawyers will make a lot of money out of it. I don't think it's the best work that you can do, but indeed, we will have to do that. Then you have the local supervisors who rightly say, but come on, if you have your client here, if you book your operation here, you need to have your risk management capacity here. And I see Bundesbank saying, yes. So indeed, but it means another 2,000 people. It means another IT capabilities. And you need to build that. And it's not something you do overnight. So we really need clarity. And I just want to mention en passant something that is even more important, the clearing capacity. Then we are not speaking of some thousand people. We are speaking of trillions of value of contracts. And trillions of contracts, it's very, very, very important. So what are you going to do? Where are you going to move it? Do you have the technical capacity to move it? Do you have the willingness from the local regulators to supervise something that looks like hundreds of trillions in terms of exposure? It's really questions that, I mean, of course, it's nice to say we want to find a good agreement, but what does it mean in practice? In fact, it's not only the financial industry, I guess everybody needs clarity, and the sooner the better.
But I mean, this shows how important it is that after those 2 years, we don't face a situation where the UK is in a third country status, maybe even behind Canada because there is no trade agreement ready, and this definitely has to be avoided. And I'm not so sure that May's snap election that she has caused now is not a clever move, and probably directs more or shows more elements of a position later on that could lead to a softer Brexit than a harder Brexit. Because I mean, she's ruling on a 17 seats majority at the moment. Has very hard Brexiteers that she has to please in her negotiation position. And I mean, if the polls are right, after this election, she will have a clearer mandate. And she is not so dependent on these extremist Britanniers, leavers, and those who would like to have a position of Britain and maybe even a second referendum. So by that, I think she opens more the door of a softer position. We have Macron probably in 2 weeks' time, who hopefully will be president of France, and he has stated as well, opposite to Hollande, that he would be more ready to discuss with the UK, and then we have discussions later on when Germany has elected a new chancellor and a new program maybe. I'm not so yeah, I'm more confident now after the recent.
Yeah, I hear we all agree that the consequences, the negative consequences, should be mitigated. However, I hear clearly there are a lot of unresolved questions that are of extreme importance to everyone in the room. And my question is also coming back to the tankers versus yachts. What are the right mechanisms to identify these issues, prioritize them, come to conclusions, and then put them into the negotiation? And we know Michel Barnier is heading the EU part. David Davis is sent into the negotiations from the UK. They will not tackle these discussions. I think there are a lot of important issues to tackle. But picking up on that idea of informal groups and looking into the room and into your industry, do you feel there is room for informal groups? There is room for influence from the finance industry to contribute, to at least defining the target picture and clarifying the questions that need to be tackled?
Well, what we need to do, everybody has a job to do. Our job is just to explain the consequences of certain decision. And in our case, like everybody, I guess, to prepare for the worst and hope the best. But we need to clearly explain, as you said, to clearly, if you make that decision, that's what it means. And to be very clear, I guess that's our value added, in fact, in that current debate. We are not there to take any political decision. We are there to adapt to their political decision. But we are there to explain the consequences of any of those decisions in a very non-polemical, very factual way. But it has to be clear. What I would not like to see, honestly, is that those type of consequences should be used as negotiating tool. Because I really understand the temptation to do that. But there is also, from the political side, they need also to understand that you can wait and keep optionality up to a certain point. And there will be a deadline where we can't keep optionality because the trade-off will be too expensive. For example, if I take the example of clearing, clearly we do have, we do have the obligation to clear all our derivatives book in what we call qualified CCP. So, clearing houses that are registered and authorized under EU rules. If we don't do that, and if you continue to clear in entities which are not qualified, then the capital impact jumps to the roof. Nobody in the financial industry is able to stand that. So that means that we will need clarity whether we can continue to use those clearinghouse in UK or not. And we can keep the optionality up to a certain point, but not too late. And given the impact in terms of financial consequences, it's very tempted to use that as a negotiating tool. But everybody needs to understand that at one point it will be too late. And also it's not something that one bank can decide alone. It's something where all the financial industry work together because those contracts, in fact, they are put in those clearinghouse and net all together. And the most numerous participants are going to be there, the most efficient the netting will be. It means that the day one large bank will estimate that it is too late for its own internal process to wait until the decision and that it will be too expensive to run the bet, then it will move elsewhere, then everybody will have to move. So it's very important to understand that this type of issue cannot be used as a negotiating tool.
So you're explaining very clear implications that are significant, that can have significant impact on the business models of the finance industry. By the way, are you incorporating potential Brexit negotiation outcomes already in your planning process, in your stress testing, in the way you look at your business going forward?
Well, I guess that's my job.
Okay.
That's when you manage a bank, your job is just to anticipate, to explain, and to take decision given the context in which you operate. If I would wait until the final solution, I wouldn't do my job properly, to be honest. So yes, indeed, it's my job, and I'm very concerned for all the people that are working for us in UK and that really wondering what's going next to them.
So asking the politician in our round here, what's your feeling? Are these implications clear enough already in the negotiation process? Are they being reflected appropriately? Are there maybe ways for more intense conversation, cooperation between policy and the business world in order to come to a positive outcome of these negotiations?
Sylvie Matherat pointed out a very important impact on the industry and was calling for clarity. If you really want legal and political clarity, you have to move to the European Union with your enterprise or company, because what we cannot provide is, in this process, clarity, because this process was not intended by the European Union, and now everybody who was criticizing the European Union realizes that the value of this European Union, after a building up process for decades, is a value itself. And the insecurity is caused by a political process which we cannot steer in the United Kingdom. But the second point, and that was your question, is of course it is good, necessary and important that those, especially the people, the citizens who are affected by that process, that these interests are pushed into the political process. And in our resolution in the European Parliament, we focused on the citizens and the outcome for the citizens. So we want to have guarantees for the EU citizens in the United Kingdom and for the UK citizens in the European Union. But in fact, the negotiations will be very difficult because we have some red lines for the European Union. We want to keep the 4 freedoms, and the UK government made it clear that the majority in the House of Commons is not willing to accept the freedom of move. And from that point of view, there cannot be a cherry picking, there cannot be an asymmetric competition framework. That is quite clear. We have some blueprints. We have the Norway example, we have the Swiss example, we have the Turkish example. And if the UK government is not willing to follow that, because that would be necessary to accept the 4 freedoms, then there is only one other model, that is the US model, with some agreements, and that will be quite difficult to negotiate them. And it is clear that that will not be finished after 2 years. And it is clear that most probable that will be mixed agreements. So we have to have the legitimization process, the ratification process in national parliaments, even in regional parliaments, like with the Canada agreement. And Catherine Ashton, we worked together in the South Korea agreement. That was a very good success for the European Union, and it went quite smoothly. But if we look at the Canadian discussion in the parliaments, I think it will be very difficult. And from that point of view, I really have the fear that we will not be able to deliver. And then there is a huge risk. The biggest risk is that we end up in a hard Brexit. Yeah, and Theresa May already announced that that is possible. And that would be the worst case, I think, for everybody participating in this process. But that is at the moment a most probable outcome if there will not be a really strong willingness of all politicians in the UK and in the European Union to overcome it. Because I think if the willingness is there, perhaps after an election with a clear basis, to overrule the House of Lords as well, then it might be easier to compromise, and then it will be necessary, and I would be in favor of that, to get a kind of interim agreement or to buy some more time. But we know that the veto power of some member states, and it is anonymity in the Council, and if we look on special interests, perhaps in Greece or in other countries in the European Union, we know that some of these governments can come into temptation to use the veto power and we need the anonymity to buy more time. But I would lobby in favor of such an agreement, because my perspective and the perspective of the European Parliament in the resolution were the citizens. And if we look at the citizens, we should overcome all these obstacles. At the moment, I see more obstacles than solutions, but I'm sure that the diplomats who are very experienced will work in high speed as quick as possible.
But let's shed some light on how you see the negotiations here in this group with a few yes/no questions. What does the parliamentary agreement to elections in Britain in June 2017 really imply? A tougher or a softer negotiation strategy for the UK government? Once again, what does the agreement to elections apply? A tougher or a softer negotiation strategy of the UK government?
I abstain.
Oh,
Okay.
it's too easy, you can't.
Tougher?
I say tougher.
No, I say softer.
Softer? Okay, good. So we have all opinions around the table. Terrific, terrific. Second question, will the development of the British economy be heavily impacted by the process of the Brexit negotiations? So question is, in how far is the process of the negotiation, the next 2 years, in how far does that have massive impact on the British economy? So massive impact? Yes?
No, I don't think so. Not the process,
No.
not the next
Process,
2
yes.
years.
No.
No?
Not the
5 years
Okay.
will be different.
Okay, okay, good. So also different views. Will the development of the EU economy be heavily impacted by the process of the negotiation? Or will people say, let them negotiate, we're going on with what's really important?
Well, same question. In process 2 years, I don't think there will be major move in the next 2 years. But when you looked at it in next 5 to 6 years, yes, indeed, I think there will be major changes.
I think it depends a lot on what you mentioned earlier, the capability, the ability, the willingness to make compromises. Where do you feel the most important compromises need to be made during the negotiation phase? You mentioned the issue of movement of people.
Freedom of movement.
Freedom of movement. Other opinions?
I mean, in the longer term, definitely. I mean, you have to have a common agreement of how the picture is being built that you have as a puzzle laid out. But in the meantime, I think you have to prioritize what to do first and on which topics you should concentrate. And Sylvie Matherat has dramatically pointed out which impact decisions that are not being taken can have on business today. So there you have to focus, to prioritize. And I think you should keep the civil law untouched, because I mean you have a long history of agreements and exchange and development together. If you start there, it would be a disaster. And then on specific issues of capital market and financial regulation, you could do something. You could find transitional agreements. You could use third country agreements that are there. You could elaborate them, enlarge them. There's a whole playground that you can use.
So no issue whatsoever?
No. That's not what I say. The question is, do you prioritize correctly? And I'm with Sylvie Matherat. You have to move on certain issues. You have to move quick. If you lose too much time, then you end up after 2 years. And I'm not saying that this will be a bright outcome. I'm as a capital market follower, probably always a bit more on the optimistic side. Markets as well at the moment, I think, share this view. But I'm well aware of the risks that if after 2 years we fall behind Canada and have a third country status for the UK, it will be disaster for everybody.
Where do you see the major areas for compromise?
Well, I don't think it's for me to answer that type of thing. So I guess what I can say is that we can adapt and react to everything as soon as we know to what. So what is the most important is to have clarity. And then if you don't have clarity about the possibility to achieve something in 2 years, I mean, that's fine. Nobody asked for that. But then in that case, you say, well, we are not going to be ready in 2 years, that's clear, because first of all, I don't know who those people speak to. I mean, clearly the Article 50 was triggered in March. You do have election in France in May. You have election in UK in June. You have election in Germany in September. So who do they speak to, honestly, before the end of the year? So that's really an issue. So that means that you're going to lose time. And that means that, in fact, 2 years may not be 2 years. So if it is the case, and once again, it's not my job today to say so, but if it is the case, then why don't you say, well, honestly, 2 years is too short. So why don't we clearly say now that you will get a transition period? And how long? And for what? Because once again, I guess everybody can adapt to everything as soon as we know to what, and we need clarity.
Clarity, a little bit of time. I'm thinking about your Gibraltar example that you mentioned. So the question is also, what are we discussing here? The Spanish would like to keep, would like to get Gibraltar back. The British want to keep it. The Gibraltars want to remain British, but also EU citizens. The British don't.
Yep.
The remaining 27 EU members want to make it as uncomfortable as possible to leave the EU. All 27 seem committed as of now, by the way. And by the way, the lucky number is 60 billion, right? That's what we all read in the press. So how does the negotiation strategy of the EU compare to the positive mood that I heard from some of the responses here around the table?
Michel Barnier was quite optimistic in the parliament, and there is an incredible experience and expertise in the European Commission to negotiate that, because that is nothing different from the entry negotiations. So if a member state wants, or a state wants to become a member of the European Union, you have the negotiations now. You have to make exactly the same. You go to all the chapters, and that is possible. But indeed, and that was the fact Sylvie mentioned, are there decision makers in power who can then make the decision in the European Union? Yes, there is Michel Barnier, there is a Commission, there is a European Parliament, and in the Council there are people who are able to decide on it. And I know that the negotiation teams now are starting, and we expect that in November there will be results on the table, because we need in European Parliament, in the national parliaments, probably almost 9 months or something like that to approve it in a parliamentary process. That is quite quick, so everybody is willing to come to solutions. And what I don't think is positive is to block the European Union now for years in negotiations between the EU and the UK. We have another problems all around the world, and from my point of view, we should really focus on developing the European Union. And if we look over the Atlantic to the United States, I think Donald Trump helped us to recognize it, because he said the European Union is Germany. It was invented to make the life harder for the United States, and he wants to negotiate bilaterally with European member states. So if we look at that perspective of Donald Trump, I think the last citizen in the European Union should be awake, because it might be in the national interest of all member states to have the European Union, because if we stick together, we will be stronger, and we will be stronger towards the United Kingdom and to the United States and to all other superpowers in the world. And that is a very good argument to develop the European Union a little bit further.
So you're in favor of, a rather shorter time frame as opposed to a longer, now in such a situation?
And focusing on real economic developments to get the capital market in the European Union into the move, and to concentrate on innovation and technology politics, for instance, or solve other questions like a better protection of the outside borders and so on. We should not stick in a bilateral negotiation for the next 10 years between the United Kingdom and the European Union. That would affect negatively the enterprises, companies, and of course it will absorb too much energy.
Under such a situation, pressure plays a big role. So who do you think is under more pressure in those 2 years to strike a deal? Is it the EU? Is it the UK? Any opinions on that?
I don't have a specific idea on that, but I think that this decision was very important and should work as a wake-up call for Europe. I mean, we all forget that Europe gave to all of us freedom, peace, growth, liberty. I mean, it's a huge advantage. And so we need to be careful not to lose that in that type of process. So, I mean, it should be a wake-up call.
I totally agree. It's in the interest of both parties. I mean, I wouldn't point one out. Probably economically, in the situation of a hard Brexit or unorderly Brexit, the UK would lose more. But that is only that cuts the story.
EU, right?
That doesn't help anybody.
Right.
And therefore, I think it's in the interest of all parties involved to come to a solution.
Does that play a role in the strategy?
Yeah,
the negotiation strategy?
I think the pressure is coming from other factors. Digitization, disruption, the changes in society. This is the real pressure. And from that point of view, the Brexit is a crisis on the one hand, but a huge opportunity on the other hand, because I believe that the Western pluralistic modern democracy type is indeed under discussion in our societies, and now people realize that there is a choice. Yeah, we can go back into nationalism, neoconservatism, which is outlined perhaps by Viktor Orban, who said that the modern pluralistic Western type of democracy has no future, and looks at Singapore, China, Russia, and Turkey. And indeed, there are some people in all countries, in Germany, even in Germany, with no unemployment almost, who are fascinated by these autocratic perspectives, but others are now standing up, are fairly awake and say, no, we want to defend our values as liberal democracies. And if I look, and that is a signal for me from France, that Macron, with his revolution or uprise of the modest people, that is working, and I would say en marche. Let's try to mobilize the forces in the middle of the societies, preventing what we have achieved in hard work in the European Union, because the European Union is not perfect, we know it. It has to be reformed, but it was quite difficult to get the European Union to that state where we are here. And if we want to destroy it, I think that is quite easy. But afterwards, we will be back in nationalism and conflicts in the continent, and that would be much more expensive than now to get this EU reformed. And from that point of view, I can only advertise for an investment in stable political framework in the European Union.
Then what does that mean? Is it conceivable that there will be no deal at the end of the 2-year period? And what would that mean?
That is possible, but I believe that Theresa May and the European Union, that we will find a solution. I'm an optimist.
Yeah, I sense that. We have a lot of optimists here on the table. Sylvie, what's your view? Is that conceivable? No deal at the end?
Well, it's possible. I mean, it all depends how the discussion will go, and I mean, you never. In my previous job, I did a lot of negotiation, and the dynamic of negotiation is sometimes very surprising. So you can never anticipate what will be out of a negotiation process. So I guess, I mean, we need to take that, and there's nothing we can do as an industry in it. And as I said, I mean, we prepare for the worst, hope for the best.
Jens?
Yeah, I mean, you called me optimist,
Yeah.
and then I tried to balance it a bit. Yes, definitely the outcome could as well be a hard Brexit, and an unorderly Brexit in a way. That is definitely a possibility. I don't hope that it will come that way, and I think there are many forces that are there to work against that, and you have talked about informal groups and lobbying and people who have European vision in mind. I mean, they are all. It's now the time to stand up and be there, and that's why probably everybody is here, because that's a topic that concerns everybody, and we have to try to get the picture right, the puzzle pieces right, and then the puzzle put together. And this can only be done with common effort. And I think as well, it's a wake-up call for the Eurozone in itself. You have said that there's a reform agenda needed, and I found it particularly interesting to hear from Ms. Merkel the idea of a multi-speed architecture. Maybe that is something that has to be considered going on, which then as well could lead to the UK being a catalyst for a change as well in the Eurozone, whatever the outcome with the UK is.
Sylvie, Matherat mentioned that Deutsche Bank has incorporated some sort of perspective on the potential outcome in their stress testing scenario.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh, what did you say? Sorry.
I said that it's my job to foresee what needs to be done.
Okay.
So I was not as precise. So it is one of the scenarios of the stress test. I didn't say that.
Okay. So I bend it probably a little bit. What about the financial markets in general? Do we think that the financial markets have incorporated any of those potential stress testing scenarios in market prices, or would something like that really lead to a massive revaluation of financial assets across the European markets?
Well, I think not yet. I mean, the market is really short-termist. I mean, you see that every day. I mean, you have a good reaction, boom, you have a bad news. It's very volatile. That's market. So no, I don't think not yet. I mean, the market it's not something. I mean, it's made of people who make decisions, and they are like everybody here. Nobody knows exactly what will happen, so it's very difficult to factor that on market reaction. So what I guess what will be done as soon as we will advance in time is that some position will be taken in order to protect actors and to preserve optionality.
You're moving billions of euros on behalf of your customers. What's your perspective on the markets, on the potential volatility as a consequence of the negotiation strategy and a potential no deal?
I mean, first of all, the hard Brexit or unholy Brexit scenario is not priced in. That is clear. And
all optimists on the markets.
Why optimism? I mean, I think it's a balanced view. The pound is still 15%, as you said, below the value that it had before Brexit. So there are some consequences that are there and that are persistent. But I think we will see many U-turns on the way. We will see a lot of volatility, and you asked what impact negotiations might have on capital markets, and they will be felt directly. We have seen this ahead of the French elections. Spreads in France have widened dramatically and then have come in, and Italy is a candidate that is being discussed, and therefore the political scenery and decisions there have and will have a major impact on capital markets over the next couple of years and even months now.
Yeah. Great. I think we have heard a number of very interesting perspectives here. Maybe also now a bit of time for questions from the audience.
Hi, Cornelia Meyer. Thank you very much for your most enlightening statements. My question is, especially to the asset management banking community, how much are you communicating with the politicians and the negotiators of both sides? Because what you're saying is very true, but as Baroness Ashton has pointed out, very often that link of communication doesn't get there. And walking these people through exactly, look, if you don't decide, this is what we're going to have to do is important, one. Secondly, how do you look at it, and that may go more towards the member of the European Parliament, how do you look at this sort of a little bit, which worries me a bit, coming from the other side of the channel, how do you look at the fact that the EU has, as you mentioned, a lot of very good trade negotiators, because that's what the EU does, it negotiates. But we in Britain don't have that many anymore, because we've delegated a lot of it to the European Union. And all of us who've been in negotiations know it goes smoother when you have people with the relevant experience. And trade negotiations, I would add, is not just a science, it's also an art.
So maybe on the first part, I will answer your two questions, but on the first one, Indeed, I mean, speaking for myself, I do that a lot. And coming from the public sector, I mean, they know me and they know that I don't exaggerate. So, because that's also you need to be very careful if you try to explain the consequences of some decision. You need to be very factual. And it's very good if you have figures that can, you know, mention that you are factual, because you should never exaggerate, because otherwise, I mean, they lose trust in you. So it's very important that they trust you. So yes, indeed, I mean, personally, I do that quite a lot. The second question, I would not be too worried about the UK capacity of negotiating. I've been in the world of negotiation for years, and I always have been a great admirer of the capacity of UK to negotiate. I mean, they are masters, really. So I would not be worried.
I mean, to blend that and to add, definitely. I mean, we are in constant contact with politicians. We invite them to us. They come to dialogues that we have. We go to circles in Berlin and present our ideas. I think the contact there is there and intense, and I think all ideas that we have discussed today are present in Berlin and elsewhere as well. And we talked to Michael Theurer on many occasions. So this dialogue is there. I think what we could do is now using this dialogue, more shaping this to a plan and come up with priorities and make an action plan out of that. I think that would be great. That would be helpful. Otherwise, on the UK negotiation capacity, I think I can only agree. I would not be worried.
Yeah, I completely agree that the diplomats in the United Kingdom are the best of the world, so they are able to negotiate. But I would like to highlight another topic. I think that in the Brexit debate we had too much emphasis on whether it might be possible to be better off if the UK leaves the European Union, and I think we should have to come back to the discussion about a win-win situation, because if I look on a global level, I'm afraid that neither continental Europe nor London will have the profit out of a long time period of insecurity. We could lose to other financial centers all around the world. And if we concentrate on the common interest of both sides, I think we will be all better off.
Great. Another question?
Thank you for the panel. I think Mr. Theurer brought up the argument of the raisin-picking thing, the four freedoms. And what we typically do is we bundle these things together. We have not heard so far the independent economists. I think those would have said that you should probably unbundle the free movement of capital and workforce, because if you have a restriction of movement of workforce, you could typically bridge it, at least to a certain extent, through the freedom of movement of capital. I think just also in terms of thinking about compromises, this should be something that might have to be thought about by EU, but also by Britain. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very easy to answer. When the European community started 60 years ago, there was no freedom of capital. So if we remember that, we have a discussion in European Parliament, in the member states, whether we really want to have freedom of capital, freedom of movement of capital, in combination with a discussion of tax avoidance schemes. And it's interesting that Nigel Farage and others now are using the Brexit to make Great Britain to a low tax country. You know, as a FDP member, I have nothing against low and simplified tax systems. But if we look at that, I just want to make it very clear, if we look at the competition analysis, it is for sure that if there is no labor movement, we can discuss about conditions, but if there is no labor movement possible, there will be an asymmetric competition situation, and we want to have a level playing field, and it is not possible to have an access to a common market if you are not willing to accept a level playing field and to cope, to cover some of the costs which are arising out of this common market. And that is not negotiable, because if you start to unbundle that, then there will be others who want to unbundle other things, and then we end up in a complete mess. So keep the 27 together. If you would start that, that will start the disintegration process of the European Union, and that would be much more expensive for everybody here in the room than we imagine at that stage.
Good. Final question? Over here.
A question and comment. The title of this panel was Europe after Brexit. And we just spoke about Brexit and not about Europe. And the question is, we don't have to be distracted in the next few months and years just by negotiating Brexit, but we have to focus on all the different mistakes we've done before to see how we can accelerate for the 27 what the citizens want. Then what would be your priorities for the next 6 months on the Eurozone versus the 27? And there is a lot of issues which are much more important for us to discuss today. Thank you.
Perspectives?
Well, yes, I mentioned that it should be a wake-up call. When I say that, it was exactly what I meant. Indeed, I mean, the fact that we had that vote showed that there was some, I mean, at best, misunderstanding about Europe, what Europe wants to do. And we need to provide some solution and some perspective, I guess, for everybody in Europe. And I really think that the doubt that this vote expressed, I mean, is really a result of a failure from all European countries, all of us, to explain exactly what all the good things that Europe brings to us. And people fail to realize, because also we went through a huge crisis, which has a dramatic impact for people everywhere in European countries. So they didn't find the answer they were hoping for. So indeed, we need to do everything we can to accelerate growth, to accelerate, I mean, the growth of Europe altogether. And for that, there is something that the European Commission had pushed, which I think is very important, the Capital Market Union. I mean, indeed, it's also quite complicated to understand what it means in reality, but when you looked at the main factors is to create, like you have in the US, for example, a whole pool of liquidity that will enable corporates to have access to capital directly. And that is certainly a source of growth for the future. But to do that, we need to make more progress in order to create that unified pool of liquidity, meaning that we need to make progress in harmonization between corporate law, between tax, between budget policies. And that's a lot of things that is very important for Europe as a whole.
I would agree. I mean, the problem would be if we would get distracted by negotiating with the UK and making that the top priority. It's a very important element for the future of Europe, but Europe in itself, the remaining countries, should, as Sylvie said, see this as a wake-up call, reform the EU, integrate it further, prioritize it, because we have challenges. Capital Market Union is one. It would be a disaster if we would now say, I mean, wait, what comes out with the negotiations in terms of Brexit, and then we restart the Capital Market Union effort. I think priorities should be economic growth in Europe and how to provide economic growth, political stability. We have so many challenges outside of Europe that have to be solved. We have nationalist tendencies. We have a immigration crisis that is still unsolved. So there are enough issues on the agenda for politicians in the Eurozone to do their job and to focus on integrating the remaining members.
From my point of view, the crisis of Europe is a failure of the national member states. In all the big issues, we have no competences on European level. Outside border control is member states, terrorism fight is member states, and migration and asylum issues are member states, and they don't find an anonymity or a majority in the member states. And from that point of view, if we really want to solve that, we need European competences, and we need a dimension of European thinking in national politics. And that is a major discussion I think we now have to lead in our societies, because the Eurosceptics, they tell us that it is better to return to nationalism, and some of them even want to return to ethnical oriented politics, like you have in mind perhaps the justification for the annexion of the Crimea. There are Russian-speaking people living. If we are entering into that, if you look on the Balkans, in medium and Middle and Eastern Europe, we have minorities in almost each countries. And if we don't have a revitalization of the European idea that borders are not important because they are open, yeah? If we don't have in mind that this European Union is guaranteeing human rights and minority rights, then I think we will lose the momentum. And from that point of view, it's a big chance, but we need a big step forward in the big questions, and I would include security policy and defense policy in that as well. But as a liberal, I'm not in favor of a European Union which is regulating each and every parcel of daily life. Yeah, but that is a discussion we have not only in Brussels but also in Wiesbaden and in Berlin, that there are political forces who are more interventionist. I think that is not a European question, and now I think it is the right time to get back to a European vision. If we would not have the European Union, we should invent it now.
Terrific. Let's build on your input and close this panel with maybe the very brief completion of one sentence, by each of you. And the sentence is: the success of the EU in the coming years will primarily depend on. Who wants to go first?
The participation and support of the citizens.
Common will to fight in the interest of future Europe.
Common will to build a common Europe.
Sounds like a very positive note at the end. Thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Bye-bye.
thank you very much.